Okay, comrades, we want to just have a brief chat here with a few comrades about the last 3 days of Labour Party conference. We have to admit, all of us were quite busy in the last 3 days, so we haven't followed every single detail, etc. But we have kept an eye open, and we want to just have a quick assessment of that until about 4:15, and then we're going to start soon the session after that. Ian, I'm going to start with you. Labour is ahead 17 points in the polls. They must have been doing really well at conference. Or is there something else, perhaps? A government that is going deeper and deeper into a hole?
I think the latter. I mean, I don't think it mattered what Labour Party did this week at their conference. I mean, one of the things that's very, very clear is the Tories have lost control of the economy. The suggestion now is either he does a U-turn, or what I think the Tories will do is make savage cuts to our public services, and that means cutting even deeper into our social care, deeper into the NHS, deeper into all of those essential things, because, to be honest, we've only got those essential things left that people need to survive. So I don't think there was a lot of work, really, that the Labour Party needed to do this week. But even still, you know, the Labour Party could have made significant improvements, I believe, in its standing if it had made some positive roads into saying that not only will it reverse the 45 pence tax cut, but it will actually increase it to 50 pence and introduce a wealth tax. I mean, I would have liked to have heard that from the Labour Party, but unfortunately, that isn't what we've got. They're just returning us back to the status quo, which obviously, you know, came out of what the austerity period of the Tories has been. So it's actually not really a great move forward when we need real investment into our NHS. We need real investment into the infrastructure of our country. And I would have liked to have heard them talk about, you know, how we're going to turn Britain back into a manufacturing country. Because, you know, one of the problems with our economy is that it's unable, you know, to build its way out, because we've got no manufacturing structure anymore, because they got rid of all the manufacturing. They had, you know, they sold it off when we had nationalised car industry, and, you know, look at the state of the steel works, etc. It would have been great to have heard a Labour Party talk about those issues, but I think, you know, we're probably at that Kinnock moment. I know the previous discussion touched on Kinnock, and I think, you know, Keir Starmer wants to compare himself to Tony Blair, but obviously, you know, I believe he's more of a Neil Kinnock person, on the basis that, you know, he's declared war on his own party's supporters. You know, he's done the same as what Kinnock did with not supporting the mine workers, or where he's not supporting the RMT and obviously the dockers, and he could have gone and stood with those dockers. And I think he's paid himself as the Kinnock of the Labour Party at this moment in time. And I think, you know, we all remember that even when Kinnock was so far in front, you know, and it was harder to lose than to win, he still messed it up. Because the thing about the Labour Party and what it's failing to understand is if it can't get its own voters to vote for it, and it's relying on the Tories, Tories are always Tories. And when it comes push to shove, they'll always be Tories.
That's quite interesting, because the Daily Telegraph has today a big commentary on Labour Party conference and the Starmer speech, which they really liked. Or, let's say it like that, they think the Tories, as I say, are going mad, and the Labour Party is now the not mad option for the Telegraph. Kevin, the main thing that was reported from Labour Party conference was Starmer's speech, you know, in front of the Union Jack, getting back into the centre ground, making it ready for government, a safe second 11, as we've heard earlier. Do you think they're succeeding with that?
Oh, I think they're succeeding very well. I would have loved to have gone to Labour Party conference, because there are a number of historic firsts this year. Particularly, I would have loved to have witnessed the pantomime of so-called socialists singing a monarchist hymn, which has never been sung before, so that's an historical first. There were a whole series of historical firsts at that conference, but there's also a lot of continuity, particularly the purges of the left, comrades turning up as fully accredited delegates and then finding that their accreditation's been withdrawn. and of course the suppression of debate. Comrades tried to move references back in order to get decent debate. As for the speech, it was a little bit of a sort of Tony Blair tribute act, but without the charisma of Tony Blair. I'm not sure I'd always use that word, but lots of people said he had it. But what he did have were the something which the English teacher in me finds reprehensible, is a whole series of sentences without subjects. In other words, and also a whole lot of words without content. So it was, full of verbiage. What policies there were often fairly lukewarm, and they certainly weren't sufficient to deal with the type of crisis that's facing, ordinary people at the moment. This great British energy idea. Where's the ownership of the basic energy companies? Where's the control over large parts of the economy? It's essentially a pro-capitalist sort of speech. I don't take great credit for this one, but Keir Starmer described the Labour Party as the political wing of the British people. I think it's probably better to say that Keir Starmer is the representative of the political wing of British capitalism. He's now, an out-and-out capitalist politician. There's not a trace of any sort of working class commitment. And in the last discussion, we were talking about this, and we will go on to talk about this in the other sessions. So the nature of the Labour Party, and particularly now, is openly capitalist leadership, is something we've all got to consider.
In terms of the left, there wasn't, I'm bringing you in, Audrey, now, there wasn't that much to see of the left. Though having said that, we're going to get into that in a little while, there were some votes where it got quite close. But the most interesting, perhaps, was the Ukraine debate, where they moved a motion which is quite, pro-NATO and pro-Ukraine. And there was one speaker who spoke against it. There was about 10 people for it. One speaker spoke against it, was critical of NATO, pointed out there's fascists in the government, etc. And he was suspended mid-conference. And this witch hunt is continuing, isn't it, Audrey?
I think what we have to look at in terms of the witch hunt is that it actually started under Corbyn, not with his cooperation anyway, but the whole machinery of the Labour Party was taken over. We were just been talking about the importance of choosing councillors when, we found that there's been people who are on the LCF that just are there to make sure they filter out anybody who is going to speak out. And we've had real examples of that in Liverpool. We had lots of people complaining about characters and who played that role here to make sure that we don't have anybody like the 47 councillors we had in the 80s. And it's entrenched right the way through every single sinew, vein, pore, organ of the party is being infiltrated to make sure that there isn't a whiff anywhere of anybody who will not be compliant with the party. And just to say, when I missed a lot of I've missed all of it really, to be honest. I've been outside. I was outside yesterday. We had 200 dockers march from the pier head to join a rally that we called for democracy, public ownership, peace and whatever. So we just decided we would just meet together to demonstrate against Starmer as he was making his speech. And we ended up going outside. It was really interesting, We ended up going outside the conference. The police let us through, and there was a big row of dockers there with a big banner actually talking away, chanting, support the dockers. If you can't come on a picket line, you're a scab. And what was good about it was we were doing this as the delegates were coming away after listening to his speech. I stood there trying to speak to people about the witch hunt, a 71-year-old woman saying, look, I've just been expelled for no reason. I'm Audrey White, because a lot of them did know me. And 99.9% of them actually took a divergent path from the dockers even, and from me, and actually looked down the nose at you, weren't curious. I mean, that's what's really sickening. There isn't even a curiosity to say, well, you know, what have you got to say about this? So what did he say in that speech for them not to run out and flock towards the dockers? What did Starmer say that all those people, you know, didn't want to listen to an alternative view, didn't want to go and just talk to the dockers and find out what the dispute was about? It was appalling. And I did speak to some people. There was one young lad who walked along with me. Oh, I think it's fabulous, you know, fighting against it, but, you know, I'm frightened of even being seen talking to you. And he genuinely said that. He said, I was with Corbyn the other day, he said, and I was frightened of anyone taking a photograph of me talking to Corbyn. And I actually, at first, didn't think he was serious, but he was. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? He said, I don't know what to do. I think you're very brave. I said, well, it's your choice, you know. Do you want to actually be in a party where you are fearful? Or do you want to decide, well, I'm not fearful, I'll stay in the party and I'll speak out? And he felt so intimidated. He just did not know which way to turn. And that's the state of the Labour Party today. It's like, you know, when we say Stalinism, I mean, it's fascist. It really is. Suppressing people who want to talk against NATO. Suppressing people, I mean, even the MPs themselves weren't allowed to sign a letter by Stop the War that was critical of NATO. Oh, I'm not saying people should leave. I really am not. That's their decision. I say fight where you stand. Fight wherever you find yourself. But whatever you do, don't stay in there at the cost of your own principles.
I think this atmosphere of fear, isn't it? That's what he's created, where people are, you know, they're doing a big round around you to not be seen with you. They also played, as I understand it, the Ukrainian national anthem at conference, and you know, the speeches were reminiscent of when we talked about it, 1914. You know, you're whipping up. You have to whip up chauvinism for whatever comes next. Will there be a World War III? Who knows? But it's definitely horrific to see that the opposition party is putting up no opposition to this ludicrous ongoing war, which clearly, you know, as we've heard previously in the session, over $50 billion just by the US being pumped into it. And it's leading to all sorts of madness. There's reports today that Putin actually has blown up the gas connections to Europe now, because he doesn't need to import necessarily. This is going a very dangerous way. Ian, in terms of a union perspective, I mean, I think there was a vote in favour of £15 minimum wage, free school meals, rationalised railways. I think that's about as radical as it gets. In terms of the union perspective, do you think there were any gains made?
I mean, they voted for £15 an hour last year, and then Keir Starmer ruled it out. So I won't hold my breath that he's going to rule it in this year, even though people do need it now. And the consequences of that decision last year, and to go public on the fact that he wasn't going to support it, I was actually met with employers who told me that, you know, the union's demand for £15 is unreasonable. And the reality is that, you know, sticking to where we are, you know, on an affordability piece, you know, even the party, you know, that you know, your union's been affiliated to all these years, said it's unrealistic. I mean, that's a consequence on people's lives. He might not realise that the decisions that he made and the comments that he made has that sort of an impact, but it does. Because if people are looking at the potential for a Labour government and they see that they want to keep the same low-wage economy, then of course employers don't need to prepare for anything different. They don't need to go into discussions about raising pay, which is part of the reason why we're now in a serious wage crisis. We're in a serious wage crisis. I mean, they're talking about next year inflation will go to 6%, and then people come out and say, oh yeah, but in the 80s it used to be 17 and 18%. But they're forgetting our wages weren't as low then. The job insecurity issue wasn't as bad then. You know, and the situation as far as I can see, you know, and I welcome the decision on rail, you know, I mean, it needs to be renationalised, it needs to be controlled, but it should have gone one step further. It should have taken back into public ownership all of the buildings associated with the railways as well, because they used to belong to us too, you know, but they're very, very profitable, you know, like places like St Pancras. You know, they will stay in private hands. I mean, you know, if you're going to take the railways back, you have to take it back in total, in full. What them profiteers got out of it, we should have back in the public sector. And we should have access to all of those buildings that we used to own too. Because we paid for them, we funded them, and then they've made the profits out of them. You know, so as much as, like I say, I do welcome, you know, Louise Haig's, you know, ability to have got that change. And I do welcome, you know, for the second year running, the people on the floor of conference did actually vote in favour of raising people's wages. I have no trust or confidence that Keir Starmer will introduce a £15 minimum wage if they get elected whenever that general election comes, and it's looking sooner rather than later. Because I don't think the Tories would dare elect another leader at this moment in time without having a general election. So I do think that election is going to be forced on them, because if Kwasi Kwarteng doesn't do something about the economy very, very quickly, those Tories will probably walk to the other side. And they'll find a home with the Labour Party. I mean, because the Labour Party has moved its position to centre conservatism. I mean, that's where it's pitched itself. That's where it's currently positioned. And we know Conservatives have never supported working people or trade unions. You know, I did get told that, you know, they've confirmed that they're going to, you know, in the first 100 days put this employment paper. That was a great employment paper that Andy MacDonald moved last year, which they say they're going to honour in the first 100 days. But I have concerns that the person who was the architect of that paper was forced to resign because he went along and supported the right for people to be on £15 an hour. So I think actions speak louder than words. Rhetoric's very easy, and I think we've seen a lot of rhetoric this week, you know, on the floor of the Labour Party conference. But what's going on in those fringe meetings, you know, when you hear Wes Streeting talking about, you know, we shouldn't get complacent, we've got more left-wingers to purge from the party, it shows that their job isn't done. And I just go back to this point, you know, a bird doesn't fly with one wing, it needs two. And the Labour Party needs the support of people who's voted for it in the past. Now, I've said on many occasions during this conference at meetings, I started leafleting for the Labour Party at 10-year-old. It's nearly 50 years ago. Right? And last year I was called an entryist. Right? But I've been a member for years. I've only been a member ever of the Labour Party, and I've never campaigned against it. You know, but the next election will be the first time in my life that I will campaign against the Labour Party. And the problem they've got is all of the people that I know do not trust Keir Starmer, and all lifelong Labour people who will not be voting Labour. They don't trust them. You know, so I think, you know, we should have concerns about the way that the Tories are going, but I don't see any support coming. No matter what Wes Streeting suggests about the cavalry coming over the hill, I don't see them as the cavalry.
Who are you going to campaign for?
At this moment in time, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been working with lots of different political organisations. I'm going to speak at the Breakthrough Conference on the 8th of October. I'm up in Scotland, and I'm going to be taking part in the first SNP conference that I've ever been to, which will be interesting too, because they've just put a trade union group together, which I think is quite an important first step for the SNP. Because, you know, the SNP, you know, I think, you know, at the next election, the SNP will stand on that platform. Who do you want to govern you, yourself or Westminster? And seeing the shambolic situation that the English Parliament has put their country in, I think en masse, they will make that decision that it should be a Scottish Parliament. And that's going to cause even more chaos in the United Kingdom. You know, it's going to cause even more problems with the society that we live in. And all of it's been brought about because we've got a failure of politics, a failure of politicians to build a society that's fair and equal and just. And when you talk about the Ukraine war, I mean, whenever has there never been a voice allowed to speak up, to say peace is important? No war's ever been solved from bombing people into oblivion. It always comes from a political solution. A war is caused by political failure, but political solutions are the only way to resolve them. And there is nobody saying we need peace. And that's a huge issue, because there's so many people's lives being ruined in Ukraine, in a war that's being fought out, you know, and with a military machine that has the weapons to kill and maim people on the biggest scale we've ever seen. And nobody is speaking out to say, let's have some peace, let's sit down, let's have some dialogue together, let's resolve this situation. And not even the opposition party is prepared to have an option which is different from the governing party.
Well, there was peace talks, wasn't there? We had Craig Murray yesterday with us, and he's a former ambassador. He's really got great insights, and he was in Turkey at those talks where they were the Ukrainian and Russian governments were talking, and they were quite close to working out an agreement. And then the U.S. government said, no, you're not agreeing anything. Exactly. You know, we're going to push this on. But a follow-up question to you quickly: are you hearing any things in terms of the unions becoming more dissatisfied? And the Bakers Union has voted to disaffiliate. Are there other unions that are discussing this more seriously now, to your knowledge? And what do you think, if a Starmer government comes in, that will let down the workers, as you pointed out? Will that increase the pressure on disaffiliation?
I have a I know there's a lot of unrest in a lot of trade unions. Whether that will put enough pressure on, I mean, there was motions after motions at conference about disaffiliation. You know, I mean, I am aware of that. I mean, a lot of people talk to me about, you know, how they were going to go about it. Did I have a model motion? I'm not prepared to interfere in the workings of other trade unions. It's not my role. My role is to look after the members that elected me into my position. But I do think it's very, very important, because one of the things I would say about the Labour Party conference is, if you spend all that money, coming to a conference where you're entitled to put motions on the floor, but then they get ignored, you've got to question yourself whether that's good value for your members' money. And I think that's an important question, because if it's just a supporters club, which clearly it is, because if you speak out of turn you get banned, you know, if you don't follow the leader's great plan, then you're banned. If you speak up or speak out, then you're demonised and you're isolated. And I think the Al Jazeera show has shown exactly how people are treated who have a different opinion. And I think that should concern any trade unionist, because one of the things about trade unionists is we're about promoting equality. We're about fighting injustice. We also fight for the right for people to have an opinion, even if it's difficult, to have the right to freedom of speech, to believe in democracy. And I think there's many union members that are across the country that do have concerns about whether or not they should be supporting a party that doesn't fight in their interests and represents our class and spends too much time talking about things that are irrelevant to them, and then trying to create new communities, new people to demonise. And that's concerning.
Thanks, Ian. Kevin, let's talk about the left then at conference. I mean, just quickly on something Ian said, you know, the two wings thing. I think it could be two left-wing wings. You know, and I think we should have no qualms kicking out the right of the Labour Party, and Corbyn should probably have done that actually when he was in charge. Kevin, there were some interesting votes, and when I've read reports of it, I'm actually quite surprised how close some of them were, considering, you know, the wave of expulsions and suspensions just before conference. So quite a few votes, apparently 40-60, 40 for the left, you know, the CLP, the individual delegates voting, 40-60. For example, but 40 for the left. So we've lost pretty much everything. Just to go through a few things that comrades might not know, the National Constitutional Committee, which is supposedly looking into disciplinary matters, that was won by the right. That was, previously all these votes were won by the left previously. There was a rule change put forward by the Campaign for Labour Party Democracy to have basically Corbyn reinstated. That was the rule change was about. That was lost. Also now the Conference Arrangements Committee, that half that was to be elected at conference directly, by the members before conference, one member, one vote, that is now been scrapped, and now the Conference Arrangements Committee will be elected at conference, and that obviously takes, shows that the right is in charge there. It came closest to a motion on Palestine, or more precisely, the Palestine motion that was voted through last year in favor of, in solidarity with Palestine. You remember the scenes, they were very, very moving scenes when that went through. That was missing in the National Policy Forum document on foreign policy. It made no reference to Palestine at all. So somebody moved a reference back, which means, this is the way you have to show that you're unhappy with it, to have it changed. Somebody moved to reference it back because Palestine was missing. And that was, I'm told, it looked like in the hall, it looked like there was a majority in favor of a reference back, or very close in any case. A card vote should have been called, but Angela Eagle, the chair, we know all about Angela Eagle, don't we, ruled out the card vote basically and moved on. But that sort of, I think, is an expression that the left actually is still there in surprising numbers. They might not have come out and stood with you in solidarity, but in the hall, perhaps there was still a sign of life there. Kevin, what do you think?
Yes.
Speechless.
Yes, I think you're right, Tina, that there is still a left in the Labour Party. I mean, the membership of the party has fallen quite dramatically, but I think there still is a left there. It sometimes expresses itself in conference votes, and clearly the examples you gave there. I think one of the big forces, though, that stands behind Starmer is both the trade union leaderships, many of whom have the view that if he gets into government, he'll carry out some policies broadly in the interests of their members. I'm not convinced of that at all. But also because many of the union leaders are, Ian accepted, are bureaucrats by nature, and see their function essentially as sort of bargaining for a better price of the labour power of their members. In other words, they're working a capitalist system, and the Labour government is part of that. But I think, although the left hasn't gone away, I think it is very disorganised, I think it's very demoralised, and I think it is very confused. And I think the confusion is around really what the best strategy and tactics are, both within the party and outside, which is why I think the next two sessions are going to be very important to discuss quite how we see that going. I think one of the big problems is that what the left hasn't done is really looked at what went wrong under Corbynism. We know who the enemies are, and it's now been revealed in the various documentaries, although lots of people in this city could have told you and told lots of other people that a few years ago. So we know who the enemy were, and the enemy was within. We know who the bureaucrats were, we knew who the people were, and without going too much into the history of my own constituency, when we tried to pursue those enemies within, we were held back. We were told at the highest level of the party, in and around the leader's office and in and around the deputy leader's office, don't push, don't rock the boat. Try to be conciliatory towards these people who are undermining you. So I think we have to have a really good balance sheet on the left. We have to try to understand why the left failed, and it isn't, I think, any good just to blame the right. We know what the right are. The right's job is to attack us. And what we often go into battles with one, hand tied behind us. Far too many people are not serious in taking on the right, not recognising them, that they're not comrades. These people are, political opponents. In the famous phrase which you used to have in Parliament, that the opposition are in front of you, but the enemy are usually behind you in your own party. And we've never really accepted that. Our leaders on the left are far too conciliatory, have been, and, there's a long history of that. The militant comrades who were speaking earlier know what happened with many of the soft lefts there. And there's a long history of that. And that the battle has to be for clarification on the left, but it also has to be for, principled politics, for democratic change inside the movement, and also a recognition that that arguments about wings, I don't, that Ian has put forward, I don't think are accurate. I just want one wing, and it's the left wing. And a bird can fly, I think, like that. At least it bloody well should do, anyway.
With two left wings, probably. It's going around in circles. Let's not go there. Just one follow-up questions for you then, Kevin, or last question before we go to the setup for the next meeting. In terms of the cost of living crisis, which will become it's very serious for a lot of people already, but combined with, the falling pound, mortgages, they're now talking about mortgages going up to 6-7%. For a lot of people who've had a 0% mortgage, and this is now, that could, shoot up payments by £200, £300, £400 a month, and will lead to massive economic catastrophe, let alone the situation with, being able to not afford food and etc. Have you heard anything that assures you? You've touched on it, but has the Labour Party come out with anything that will help people?
No.
Ian, you've been following that one as well, haven't you?
Yeah, sorry. The crisis that we're in needs real radical reform, and that's not what's on offer at the Labour Party. It's absolutely not on offer. We need the policies that were presented to the United Kingdom in 2017 and then built upon in 2019. Those were real radical reforms. Not real radical reforms, social democratic radical reforms that are actually commonplace in right across Europe in reality. But for here, real radical reforms just goes to show how far politics has shifted, which is why now we have a fight between the right and the right. It's the right and the far right, I believe Liz Truss has only been seen to give one message, which was to welcome the fascist election in Italy, which is why she's now being called Trussalina, which is probably apt, but it just goes to show how far politics has moved in the wrong direction, and it's offering the wrong solutions to the situation that we all face in our society.
And I think what we have to, we're talking about delegates, a conference now, but we have to also look at, the Parliamentary Labour Party. We had that opportunity for a short while to have, to have real representation, but we were never given the means to achieve that. Even within my own constituency, Louise Ellman's political position was absolutely 100% opposed to ours. And that was the problem we had with Louise Ellman. But when it came to having to being able to select another MP, we were denied that right. And this Kim Johnson was imposed upon us. And the only thing I knew about Kim Johnson was that she'd actually been a delegate to conference, and that she'd actually voted for fast track expulsions. And I think that's what qualified her within the party to be imposed upon Liverpool, a constituency that had been vilified. We'd had false accusations against us, that the reason why we were against Louise Elm was anti-Semitism. And we've seen with my case against the Jewish Chronicle, and also the Al Jazeera documentaries and so on, that it was a scam, and it was used against us. But what I think now is we have to look at that, you know, conference, if anybody speaks out at conference, I mean, why did we lose all these votes? By small numbers, because they did the calculations and they expelled you, and you know, or suspended you or took the credentials off you. And why would you play in a rigged game? Well, you know, come and play this game with us. And if you get anywhere near winning, you're out. In fact, you're not just out. We'll discredit you. We'll break you. We'll disillusion you. And why do we want to really get ourselves in that position when we don't have a hope in hell of winning? But then on the other hand, there are still some people there because surprisingly, these votes that we've just had show that people are there. Now, if they were brave enough to speak out against the witch hunt, because it's never from the top, you're not going to get anyone in the PLP speaking up, even the socialist group of MPs, fabulous as they sounded last night on The World Transformed. None of them have got the courage, none of them got the political acumen to realise that their future would be much better if they stood alone, stood on their principles instead of being cowed down by the leadership and by the machinery itself. Can't they see the writing on the wall? Can't they see that if they really want to hold to their integrity and their principles and represent the working class, that they are going to continue to be bogged down with fighting? If they would walk across the floor, to where Corbyn's sitting, and the unions got behind it, we could really, really have some optimism that we've got a party where we can start from, a party where we can hope to have true representation for working class people. And I think if that was to happen, don't hold your breath though, but if that was to happen, it would be tremendous. And I think we're finished really within the Labour Party, because not just Starmer, the machinery itself, all of the PLP are all cowed by what's going on. And we've got to take a lead from the actions of the trade unions and put pressure within our unions to make sure that there is a political voice somewhere for working class people, because at the moment there really isn't. In fact, the Labour Party is working actively against the interest of the British working class, and that's why we've got to make sure that we radically change things.
Thank you, Audrey. I think sort of maybe to try and finish on a little bit of an up, but you know, this is the serious situation, but it's serious also from capitalism points of view. I think capitalism is actually in dire straits. We're going into a recession. This is an international phenomenon. Of course, capitalism has been experiencing serious problems for a number of years, but they are increasing with, quicker and quicker. The fact that the government feels the need to enforce various laws to stop us from protesting, to stop us, speaking out online, etc., shows it's weak. It doesn't show it's strong. It actually shows it is weak, and it fears the working class. It fears us fighting back, and we are seeing signs of life with various trade union struggles, and particularly I think the Royal Mail strikes are really stepping up now, and they're going to have a hot October. And on October the 1st, there's going to be coordinated strike action from a number of trade unions. So there is sign of life. Corbyn has forced the left together. Of course, the whole left in Britain was united because of Corbyn in the Labour Party. That has stopped now. We now have to discuss how we can move forward and how we can unite. And of course, that's what the rest of this afternoon is about. We're going to go into a session now on Is the Labour Party Dead? A debate with different points of view to be heard. And then at 7 o'clock, we have a meeting on what future for the left. And we're going to have a few minutes here where there's going to be nothing on screen because we're resetting things, but bear with us and we'll continue. Thank you.